This conference will now be recorded.
You're on.
This is Uncle D. Welcome to Two Lean Guys podcast. Today on episode 2, we are joined by a mentor for the industry, Bruce Hamilton, affectionately known in the community as Old Lean Dude. And he's got a conference coming up, the 15th Northeast Lean Conference in Hartford, Connecticut, October 23rd to 24th. And the topic is total employee involvement, engaging hearts and minds. And so, Bruce, welcome to the show.
Yeah, well, Dennis and John, thanks for asking me to talk about this. Has long been a very important topic to me. You know, I think that there's a technical part to continuous improvement, which is essential. Too often, you know, we tend to glam onto the technical part and forget that there are people involved, and so involvement of people is often the larger and more complex problem to solve.
And on that note, to make sure Johnny Hustle's involved, Johnny, welcome to the show as always.
Uncle D, it's awfully good to be here. And Bruce, thank you again for joining us. And Bruce, we're really excited about this particular topic. It really follows well the topic that we had on our first episode, which was the philosophy of flying geese and how we apply that to our methodology. So this is really a fantastic follow-on to that. And we're really looking forward to seeing how your workshops go at your event as well.
Well, terrific.
I'm sorry, Bruce.
No, I was just saying thank you.
We'll post links to the Northeast Lean Conference and to the oldleandude.com blog, as well as to GBMP, to make sure that everybody can read up a little bit more about some of these things. So, Bruce, I don't know if you know, but you've got a lot of minions on the street. There are a lot of people that are influenced by your leadership, and I know you're a humble guy and you don't want this to be about you, but I do have to say that Toast Kaizen, when it hit, and I know you know this, was revolutionary. And with a lack of standards in the industry for people to use in delivering a consistent message, I really am grateful that GBMP has developed the toolkits that it has, because I'm a habitual user of everything from moments of truth, teaching Anna to drive, all the way through the toolkits like the hack game, the wall game. These simple things I've used to help engage people and bring resistance down. So for me, I'm grateful for that. So thank you.
Well, good, and thank you for being a customer. You know, we hope that people get some value out of them. I could just say a couple of things about the Toast video. You know, people sometimes, my face has become, at least within our industry, become fairly well known, and people see me and they say, "Oh, you're famous." And you know, my response is, you know, I'm not really famous. The Toast video is famous. I just happen to be on it. But it's, you know, there are probably, I think we lost count at about 500,000 copies. So it is everywhere. It's kind of taken on a life of its own. And it was an attempt, you know, originally to focus on how important observation is. And what you may not know is that the first version of it was actually developed for my management team. It was an exercise to encourage vice presidents to actually get out of their offices and observe directly. And it had, you know, some positive impact. I think maybe our hit rate was, with the group I worked with, was a little better than 50%. So it was valuable that way. The basic idea is that you can walk by a process every day and actually not see it at all. So, you know, having a different frame of reference when you're watching and observing, you know, it's about the science of continuous improvement, actually watching for improvement. So, after that, when I got into consulting, I used it personally for a while. And then somebody in our organization said, maybe we should beef that up a little bit and maybe somebody be interested in it. And then, 20 years later, here we are. But it's actually had its 20th birthday, and a bit of a surprise to me. It was essentially about any industry and no industry, and maybe that's why it works. But I think the significant thing in context of our conversation today is that I was not having so much trouble with frontline engagement at the point I made that video. I was having trouble with engagement of the leadership, of the management. Not because because they were disapproving of the work that was being done, because by the time that video was made, which was the original one was made in 1998, we had already been trying and experimenting with Lean or TPS for a decade. So, and we'd had some pretty good success. We were not, I don't want to overstate the success, but it was pretty good. And the thing that was most amazing to me was just how brilliant the frontline people were. I worked in an organization where we didn't have a great deal of support resources, so there's a little bit of serendipity there. It meant that there was more of a need to rely directly with the people who do the work. I also, just as an anecdote, I had not started in manufacturing, so when I got into manufacturing, I was forced into a position of relying on others. I didn't enter with the misconception that I knew all the answers. So it gave me a rather fortunate, unique perspective as a manager of manufacturing. And so this whole idea of having many people involved sort of grew out of need. Our slogan at GBMP is everybody, every day. And it represents my learning as an operating manager that if you actually want to change your organization, you change it a person at a time. And having a few people involved, sort of subject matter experts or green belts or black belts. And I'm not saying there isn't a tremendous value to having specialties. Manufacturing and business is based on specialties. There are doctors and there are nurses and there are engineers and there are accountants and salespeople, and all of these functional parts of your organization are critical to making it run. But within every one of those quarters, there's this huge opportunity. There's problems. People have problems. We don't see them as problems. People by nature are long suffering. After we have a problem long enough, it ceases to become a problem. And so the issue with the management team was that they just didn't feel like there was a problem there for them to solve. Didn't see the problems within the organization. Tend to be pretty optimistic about improvement. I think you have to be an optimist in this business. And I also tend to be pretty generous. I think the opportunity to learn exists at every level. There's really no difference on a basic level between a senior vice president and a frontline person in terms of changing their thinking, changing the frame of reference. But it does actually require that direct observation. You actually go and see something. That science part of it is really basic. And once somebody gets into that, they begin to see the need, and particularly with management, once they get to see the brilliance of their employees, their confidence increases, and there's more opportunity for improvement. People's confidence in each other, managers' confidence in employees tends to ratchet up when they see a success. But the starting point actually is a lot of preconceptions, a lot of kind of filling in the blanks about what's really happening, and mostly that's not very good. We don't have a very good image of our fellow workers. We tend to think that we're okay and they're not. That's kind of grows out of that, the siloed traditional organization. So key to that for me was just to get people out and around, and a lot of my posts, if you read my blog, deal with just that, this sort of misunderstanding misconception that each of us has about the other's job. The basic idea that people want to do the right thing is something that you only discover if you get out there with them. So,
Bruce,
yeah.
on that point, when you go out and begin to win hearts and minds, I find that the mindset of the management, and this goes back to some of our prior conversations just before the podcast, is ensuring that they've got the right mindset before they go out, before you unleash them, because sometimes their paradigm hasn't shifted to respect for people yet from like command and control. And I think that's really a dangerous line sometimes. I don't know if you've got any kind of feedback on that.
Yeah, so in fact, that's a really good question. And so first, let's not, stereotypes, I think, certainly have a validity. But then on the other hand, there are managers who, for some reason or other, absolutely understand. They've just been waiting for this change in thinking. And they would be the exception, but there's a spectrum. There are, people learn at different rates. And they actually need to experience, to have a personal experience to learn. But what I coach managers all the time, and I'm using a kind of a hackneyed expression, fake it till you feel it. I tell them, don't, be careful. I'm actually ask them, tell them how to behave even if they don't believe it. Kurt Vonnegut said, beware who you pretend to be, because that's who you are. But I try to use that in reverse. I say pretend. If you may feel that you don't believe a thing about continuous improvement or what people's strengths are, but act as if you do, because then you get the full benefit of seeing people's brilliance. And with a lot of persons that works out just fine. Mr. Shigeo Shingo said that 95% of objection is just cautionary, and this has to do with managers as well as employees. We have doubts, we have preconceptions, and they're based upon, typically they're just based upon fabrication. We haven't actually been out to see. So my history with, first as an operating manager for, quite a few years, and now as a consultant, is that a pretty good percentage, let's say maybe 80% of the managers that I work with can make a change in their thinking, and it's a little bit at a time. They have to lighten up and give their employees a chance to succeed. And the discovery for the manager has to be that it's not all for me. It's not all on me. It's not all my responsibility. That's the thing that I think is so worrisome to managers, is that they feel the full weight of the need for change, and they worry that if something goes wrong, that's going to reflect badly on them. So managers
Bruce,
tend to be very risk averse.
Bruce, do you think that comes down to a level of being risk averse and understanding the scale of their risk? I mean, if a line person makes a mistake, maybe that dollar value of that mistake is relatively low. But when you're looking at the mid to upper level managers, and they go down a road where ultimately they find out that it was a mistake, it could be an enormous amount of money that gets spent going down the wrong road. Do you think it's that kind of scalability of risk that makes them much more hesitant?
Yeah, so, I certainly promote the idea of Kaizen being many small changes for the better, with the emphasis on small for that reason. But over time, when your success rate increases, the idea of small changes too, you develop confidence. And so, yeah, managers naturally, by their nature, worry. Again, it depends on the environment that you're in. No two companies are exactly alike. A manager who in turn is working for a micromanager is going to have a very different level of concern than one where a manager is sort of more interested in employee development. So
what are some of the techniques that you've used to kind of help those folks who are risk averse to step up and actually take that risk? Is it just doing the small bites, or is it, having them push the I believe button? What is it that you do that you think helps break that logjam?
Well, I like to always start on something that makes the job easier for the person who has the concern. Usually the risk is something where I'm risking something, but I'm not sure that I'm going to get a benefit for it. So it can be something very simple. The idea of having there's this hesitating to use Japanese words, but there's this word muri, and I'm probably mispronouncing it. But the basic idea is there's some irrationality or strain in the job, and so eliminating that presents a very personal benefit versus risk. And oftentimes that type of change does not require, it doesn't present much risk to the business. I'm certainly not in favor of, betting the farm on, early improvements. I think, people with experienced employees really don't make big mistakes, but they make small mistakes. And so try small things, make small mistakes. I think there's this learning curve. We realize that, if you make a mistake, then you change it quickly. One of the challenges, I think, in industries that are businesses that are just getting into continuous improvement is that there hasn't been a lot of change. Things don't change very much. And I worked in a company that was very static. It had already been around 50 years before I joined it, and things did not change very much. So the concept was that if a change occurred, that could be the change for the next 20 years. So very, very concerned that that this change, if it didn't work out, we're stuck with it. And the other concern is that the change is made and I wasn't consulted. There was nobody, I wasn't involved. And I hear that those two objections I hear, regardless of the business I'm in. I'll hear that from a doctor, or I'll hear that from a machinist. Nobody asked me, and geez, when the change was made, now we're kind of stuck with it. So part of the learning is this idea of continuous improvement. Try many things. Try them quickly and get many people involved. And pretty soon you discover that the risk is not as great and the benefit is much greater than you anticipated. That's one of the most significant things about getting people involved is there's this belief at the beginning that little improvements don't have much effect. And it's hard to exactly explain that until people do it. But there have been so many instances where, I'm thinking of a hospital I worked with where the physicists and very technical people, and they were very skeptical about the little changes. And so the big victory at the end of the work was from a physicist who said, I've looked at this from many angles, and I can only conclude that the gains that we have are just an accumulation of many small things that we did. And that was his big takeaway. And that was a good day for me, because I think that's the kind of thing that we need to convey. And incidentally, under the heading of total employee involvement, it was necessary for this group to understand that all the improvements required all of the people. That we were examining a task that probably would have been done by somebody, a technician who worked, in this case, in something, let's say, X-ray technology. And all the focus had previously been there. We didn't have all the viewpoints. We missed the docs, we missed the physicist, we missed the dosimetrist, we missed all the people who would be users and so forth. And when they looked at it together, when they all went and observed together, all those many viewpoints together, that's total employee involvement. They got an answer and a solution which was much greater than they could have gotten separately.
We like to say that none of us are smarter than all of us.
That's right. The smartest person in the room is everyone.
Is
all of us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
I agree with that.
Steps, those are opportunities to experiment with communicating too, though, Bruce, right? I mean, if it's a small change, it's an opportunity for us to practice, asking why and giving someone a chance to learn from their experience, no matter what their learning style is, and being open to the fact that some people are going to learn slower than others. Engaging hearts and minds is oof, that's like really winning the war. So at the conference this year, how are you guys going to be really communicating that message?
Well, there's nothing like going to the source. And we actually, every year at the conference, for example, we have this large room, which we call the Lean Lounge, where frontline employees set up with tabletop displays and describe kind of their learning. This is what we did and this is what we got. Awful lot of sharing that goes on in that environment. I certainly enjoy listening to keynote speakers, and we've got some really good ones that deal with problem solving. And Alan Robinson will talk about the idea-driven organization. And so there's big ideas about how you create an organization of thinkers and problem solvers, but then there are the problem solvers themselves. I think there's nothing better than a testimonial from a peer. So we try to create, sort of a group of peers in very different, we've tried to sample from different parts of an organization, from engineering and from sales and from accounting, and so that we kind of get the idea that that improvement is a company-wide, it's an organization-wide process, and it relates to any business. So we'll have service industries. We're in Hartford, and we have a lot of insurance and banking folks coming, and they want to know, okay, how's that work for me? We're not Toyota, we don't make things, but we do have a process, and so the key is to kind of prime the pump, to give some people practical examples and some ideas. Ultimately, I think just sharing ideas, as particular ideas, is very important. Later this week, I'm going to be working with just a grassroots organization. It's called the Northeast Idea Generation Consortium, and it's just a group of people. It's got Zoo New England and Mass General Hospital and Raytheon. It's just disparate group of people from all different types of organizations, but they have one goal, and that is, how do we get everybody involved in bringing ideas forward? And it's not just what does your idea board look like? It's how do we create that environment where people want to provide those ideas, where they'll be thinking about it all the time, where their threshold of pain has lowered to the point that what was just an annoyance is now a problem, and they're going to do something about it. And in order for that to happen, it can't just happen with the front line. It has to be the person who looks over his or her shoulder to see if their supervisor is on board with that too. That video, you'd mentioned it earlier, Dennis, I've not forgotten the name of it. Moments of Truth is all about that. It's about we each work for somebody who's supervises us, and we want to know that person is buying into what we're doing.
Absolutely. That's part of the reason for our podcast, is to create a platform where people can listen about how to get traction practically, how to get one heart, one mind, one. The ability for the peer groups to share with each other, of course, is always magic. And, John and I really think that there is, to our challenge, is a lack of relevant situational guidance out there. And so I really appreciate you sharing this time with us. I know we have a specific time frame, but in the last couple minutes, what I'd like to do is a closing segment we call Plus Delta, where each of us give just something they liked about our time together today, and something that they thought could be better. If you don't mind, I'll be so bold as to go first, and then Johnny, and then I'll ask our guest to go last.
Surely.
For me, it was really just the time listening to Bruce. I mean, I do. Again, I think you're a mentor for the industry. I think you're a beacon for me to work towards with regards to practical ways to get one more person on board and get them involved. And that's why I'm a habitual user of the tools and such. So for me, it is a full circle conversation, Bruce, at least just to hear from you, because I don't know if you know, but my Lean journey after school and a little bit of, wanting to know about Lean began inside of a class where you were teaching. So thank you. And My delta is our technology stuff, Johnny. We'll do our kata questions later, pal.
Yeah, no problem.
And we're going to work through some of our tech stuff. That's my delta. So, Monsieur Dubois, what is your plus delta?
Well, what I really liked from the discussion with Bruce, even though we didn't force him into the structure, during that discussion, he did talk about the way that we would normally do our Kaizen idea sheet. He talked about the problem, which was everything to do with why is it that employee engagement can be so hard, and especially at the upper executive levels and working your way down. And then he even went into some proposed solutions, which was, doing small things first and continuing on down that path until people do get more and more comfortable with the risk and the scale of the risk that goes along with that. And then he even talked about the desired effects, which was, you have those first wins in the beginning that just get everybody comfortable, and then those wins grow and grow and grow until you have, you're heading towards world class. So I think that even though we didn't force him into that structure, he just naturally did what we were hoping he would do, and it worked out really, really well.
Taking the lead again, right?
Yeah, absolutely, right. And it just goes to show that even though we didn't force him into a particular role, that he jumped into that coaching role and covered all those pieces the way that we were hoping he would.
And your delta, sir?
My delta again goes along with the technology part, and we will get better at that. I'm certain of it.
Okay, thank you. So Bruce, again, thank you so much for your time. I'd like to let our listeners know that you're
gonna listen to Bruce's plus deltas?
I am. I'm just gonna let everybody know before I tease plus delta up, Johnny.
All right, go ahead. You do that.
The Northeast Conference, of course, is October 23rd to 24th in Hartford, Connecticut. Total employee involvement, engaging hearts and minds. We want to really thank you for being here with us. But before you go, would you be so kind as to share your plus delta?
Sure. And so first of all, thank you both for we're using GBMP's products and for having me on today and for promoting the conference. That was a plus for me. We try to create a sense of community. I think community is really, really important. We can learn from each other, and too often, organizations are insular and they lose that benefit of somebody who probably is right down the street. So it was great that I had an opportunity to promote that a little bit. So those would probably be the pluses. The delta is I can be pretty scatterbrained, and I'm not sure when I need to stop talking. But once I get going, I'm a little bit like the Energizer Bunny. So thank you for I'd probably best if your technology had some sort of a silent timeout signal here, so I would know when to stop. As I do tend to get on a roll. Yeah.
I wanted to make sure we hit the time constraint we committed to, so that we could end on time or early. So,
yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, good. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing the podcast.
Yep, and as always, Uncle D and Johnny Hustle saying thank you for your time. We look forward to speaking to you soon. Peace.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.